All right, good morning, Algebra 2. Let's do this. Lesson 38, complex numbers as solutions to equations. So the idea for this lesson is, what is the relationship between the discriminant and the solutions for a quadratic equation? So what are we talking about here? Notice that this equation a long time ago, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. This is the quadratic formula. And when did we use the quadratic formula? We wanted to solve quadratic equations such as this, and for number 3. The idea is, let's look at each part A. Part A is saying solve each equation using the quadratic formula to solve the following quadratic equations, right? So let's use this quadratic formula to solve each one of these equations. And here it's saying calculate the discriminant for each equation. So what is each one? Remember here the quadratic formula is this, but the discriminant is basically, if you see under the radical, this b squared minus 4ac, this is the discriminant. And we have to calculate each part, okay? Hold on. Discriminant. So let's go through each one of these, A, B, and C. So for part A, let's do it. Let's use the quadratic formula to solve this. So notice over here, let me zoom in a little bit. Okay. So here, what is the quadratic formula? So let's say part A, right? So here we have, notice that this x squared minus 9, you could write it as x squared plus 0x minus 9 equals 0. And the idea for that is because here we need an A, a B, and a C. So here, what is our A? Our A is 1. What is our B? 0. And what is our C? It's minus 9. Okay, let me fix this. Okay, that's better. Now here, let's use the quadratic formula. So x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. What I want you to do is try and do this by yourself. Plug in a, b, and c into here and see what you get. Okay? Well, let's follow. X equals negative, let's do this, parentheses, right? Because we're going to substitute the b, which is 0, plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times a times c. So what is a? This is 1 and this is minus 9 all over 2 times 1. Okay? So it looks like this, right? Now what's the next one? X equals, notice this is negative 0. So this is just 0. So we have just 0 plus or minus the square root of 0. Now let's look at this. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 9 is positive 36 over 2. So now you have x equals plus or minus the square root, because this 0, nothing really happens to it anymore. So this 0 is here, so it's 36 over 2. And now here this becomes x is equal to plus or minus 6 over 2, which is equals plus or minus 3. Okay, because 6 divided by 2 is 3. Alright, now let's look at the next part here. B, what is part B asking us to do? Part B is asking us to find the discriminant. So what is the discriminant for this equation? Notice it's just the b squared minus 4ac. Okay, but we already did the b squared minus 4ac. What did we get for b squared minus 4ac? At the very end, inside the radical, we got 36. Okay, great. Now it says sketch the graph. So here, what will this graph look like? Remember that, what are the solutions? Here, because the solutions are plus and minus 3, what do? We just go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So this is positive 3, this is negative 3. And then what do? We just make our parabola just like this. okay? And that is our graph for the function x squared minus 9, okay? What I want you to do is try and do the next one by yourself. Try and do A, B, and C for question 2, okay? Try and use the quadratic formula, right? Let's take a look here if you want to see how it's done. Here, what is your A? Your A is 1, your B is minus 6, and your C is 9. Okay, so we have the quadratic formula, right? So let's plug everything in. X equals, and I'll try and do it side by side. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so X equals, what is your B? So it's negative, parentheses, negative 6, plus or minus the square root of, parentheses here, parentheses here, parentheses here, over, I'm just kind of setting it up for us, parentheses here. Okay, so this is 2 times 1 is on the bottom. So what is your B squared? Your B squared is negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9. Okay, and then over 2 times 1. Okay, so then how does it continue? Here, we have x equals positive 6 plus or minus the square root of, here, this is 36 minus 36, all over 2. So then now here, x is equal to 6 plus or minus the square root of 0 over 2. So x is equal to 6 plus 0 over 2, and x is equal to 6 minus 0 over 2. But then this just becomes the same thing. Here, x is just equal to 6 plus 0 divided by 2 is 3. And notice you get also, here you also get 3. So notice it's just really the same answer. You only get one solution of 3, okay? Then here, for part B, what is part B asking us? Part B is saying, what is the discriminant? It's b squared minus 4ac, right? And what did we get over here? We got that the discriminant is 0, okay? And let's see. How do we draw this graph over here? If we know only one solution is 3, so then we just go 1, 2, 3. This is our point here, and then bam. This is our graph of x squared minus 6x plus 9. Okay? Let's try the next one. Here, same idea. Notice, you remember, you see how here there was no b? And we kind of like put a 0x here. That's the same idea for this one. So here, let's see. If you have x squared plus 0x plus 9 equals 0, you have a, b, and c. Okay, you should be trying to do this by yourself. And if you can't, then I understand, then watch, right? So this is 1, 0, and 9. So let's use the quadratic formula again. So you got this, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, now I'm going to speed it up a little bit. So now this is negative b. So negative 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9 all over 2a. Now you have x is equal to 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 minus 36 all over 2. Oh, I'm sorry, this should be 2 times 1 over 2. Okay, so now here x is equal to 0 plus or minus the square root of negative 36 over 2. Then you ask yourself, oh, mister, how do you continue? Well, we just have to remember that rule. You remember that if we asked you, what is the square root of 36? You said it was 6, because 6 times 6 is 36. But what's the square root of negative 36? You have to use the idea that I is equal to the square root of minus 1. And this we covered in class. I is equal to the square root of minus 1. So watch the magic here. Notice that negative 36 is equal to 36 and negative 1. But what's the square root of 36? It's 6. And what's the square root of negative 1? It's I. So notice that the square root of negative 36 over here is 6 is 6i. So you have equals plus or minus 6i over 2. So x is equal to positive 6i over 2, and x is equal to negative 6i over 2. So x equals 3i, and x equals minus 3i. And here are the solutions, okay? But then when you ask yourself, like before, how did we graph these equations? You see, if you have plus or minus 3, they're over here. If you had positive 3, it's over here. But where is 3i and negative 3i? It's not in this plane. Hold on one second. If you actually use a calculator to graph it, and we could graph it right now, what does x squared plus 9 look like? Well, let's see. If I go y equals x squared plus 9, it just looks like, oh, what did I do wrong? Wait a second, 712, y equals x squared plus 9, okay, graph, yeah. So notice it just looks like this, but the idea is you just go from the center and you go to 9, and the graph looks like this, okay? So notice it does not intersect the x-axis, okay? And that's really the big deal. Now we're almost done with this lesson. So let's look at this part here. Let's turn the page and let's look at question number 4. Question 4 is saying, looking back at questions 1, 2, and 3 in the previous page, what is the relationship between the discriminant and the solutions for the quadratic equation? So let's take a look over here. For question A, what was the discriminant for question A? What did we get for the discriminant? We got 36. Here, what did we get for the discriminant for the second question? We got 0. Here, oh, I forgot to write it down, but what was the discriminant for part C? Notice that the discriminant was negative 36, okay? So now notice, what were the solutions we got? Here, we got, we're almost done. Here, we got 2 real solutions. We have 2 real solutions. These are real numbers, positive and negative 3. Here, when the discriminant was 0, we had 1 real solution. And when we had negative 36, we had 2 complex solutions. What this means is that you have 2 complex answers because we had a plus and minus 3i, okay? And this is what I wanted you guys to have for today, and then we're done. Here, notice that if the discriminant is, let's have this here. You see here, if the discriminant is greater than 0, you saw how this 36 is greater than 0? So then we have 2 real solutions. If the discriminant is equal to 0, it has 1 real solution, and if it's less than 0, we have 2 complex solutions. So graphically, what this means is, or try and figure out what it means, if you have 2 real solutions, that means it has to hit the x-axis at 2 points, 1 and 2. If it has 1 real solution, then it has to hit the x-axis only at 1 point over here, or somewhere on the x-axis. If there are 2 complex solutions where you get some sort of I, then it's not going to hit the x-axis at all. It avoids it at all. So if I have, like if I see a graph like this, I know the answers won't be real. They're going to be complex with some sort of I. Okay? And that was the idea for the lesson. I hope you enjoyed it.